Hey, good morning, everybody. Dave Schmidt along with Matt Nestor and producer Tom Warner. Now let's get into some high school football playoff. Probably, like Matt said, the game of the weekend is Phillips hosting Rockford Lutheran. And with us, a very special guest, Phillips head football coach Troy McAllister. Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Great, gentlemen. How about yourself?
Hey, thanks so much for coming on today. I know it's a big day for you. And it's going to be cold, maybe snowy tonight. Do you like that kind of weather conditions for you and your football team, Coach?
Yeah, we played against Plano in the first round 2 weeks, and it was snow, sleet, hail, everything you saw. So we're used to it. That was a good prep for us, and it looks like at game time today the snow is going to start.
You know, obviously you never want to look ahead, and you don't know who you're going to play in the playoffs, but I got to imagine, at least for a little while, this has got to be a matchup you guys have kind of had an eye on. Would it not be?
Yeah, when the pairings were released, we saw Rockford, and we were hoping to see him in the semis, realized it was going to be in the quarters, and I've been having nightmares all week of James Robinson running around.
You know, that was kind of going to be my next question, and I think Lutheran's got to be having the same questions going in. You know, both of you guys have put up great defensive stats and you know, run through some different opponents, but for each of you, this is probably going to be the best offensive team you've faced all year. You know, so how do you feel about your defense going into a matchup like this?
Scheme-wise, we do a pretty good job. Our defensive coaches really prepare and break things down. And we try to put our athletes in the best position possible to be successful. But, you know, when you see Rockford play, they do a lot of things really, really well. So if you take away the run, well, they can drop back and throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a challenge because if you put an extra man in the box and you stop the run, next thing you know, they're throwing it down the field.
You know, you guys both had one common opponent, and you both beat Stillman Valley, who was the state champion last year, but they had a lot of turnover. Is there any way you can compare how you played against them and how Lutheran played against them, or is that just one of those deals?
It's a tough comparison because Stillman runs wing T, so it's defensively you kind of alter how you do things to play against an offense like that. So it's really tough to compare. I just look at their points for and points against. They have to have the biggest difference in the state. And, you know, everybody talks about their offense, but their defense is very, very special as well. And they load up the box and they will dare you to throw the ball. And when it gets bad weather, those are the things that are difficult to do.
You know, why don't you tell us a little bit about your quarterback, Dwayne Collins? You know, I know he's thrown for over 1,000 yards, run for over 1,000 yards. I'm guessing he's going to drive the team bus, maybe even cook the team meal today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what he does for your team?
Dwayne's a special young man. He's been, 3-year starter now. Each year he's progressively gotten better as a quarterback. He's going to get an opportunity at Illinois State to play quarterback, which is great for him, great for his family. He was recruited as an athlete, but as they saw his senior film, they stepped up and said he can play quarterback. And he's just a unique, I believe he's a once-in-a-lifetime player. His speed, his understanding of the game, and his willingness to lead the team to victory.
And he just was named again the All-Public League quarterback. I know sometimes named him that and stuff. How does he take all that stuff? I mean, that's a lot of that. I mean, you're in Chicago. You're not in Podunk, USA. You're in a big city, and he gets a lot of attention that way.
Yeah, he's a pretty humble young man, and he tries his best. But when we sit down together, I get the smile out of him, and you realize how proud he is of the accomplishment. And he told me yesterday, Coach, I love the recognition, but he goes, quarterbacks are judged by wins and losses, and he said it won't mean a thing if we don't win Saturday night.
You know, when you look at your team, who are some of the other players? You know, when you have a player that's great, that's where everybody focuses at. But who are some of the other players, maybe some of the unsung heroes that stepped up for your team this year?
Yeah, defensively, our D tackle, Chris Elmore, he's only a sophomore. He made the All-City team as well. He made a huge difference inside for us. And our middle linebacker, number 32, Amani Jones, you'll see him matched up with James Robinson today. He might be our best football player. He runs around and he makes tackles and he hits hard and he gets up with a smile on his face every single time.
You know, you look at Chicago football, Chicago City football takes a bad rap. So you guys went out and you scheduled teams like Carmel, who beat Harlem, which was right here in our area. We saw that game, and you also played Naperville North. Was that something you guys wanted to do, was beef your schedule up this year so you were ready for the playoffs?
No question. There's a lot of really good teams in the city. People don't get an opportunity to see them. But in our conference, we end up with 2 or 3 strong games, but there's also a couple of games that aren't as difficult as you'd like them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so with our non-conference schedule, we went with Stillman Valley State Champs Week 1.
Mm-hmm.
That was for us, that was great because we got to go on the road, a long trip to a small town. So when we played Johnsburg last week, our kids were like, oh, this is just like Stillman Valley. It didn't have an effect on them. And as for Carmel and Naperville North, that's a 7A and 8A school, we really wanted to challenge our young men early in the season to say, hey, if we want to do something special, we got to play with these guys. And we were able to defeat Nick. And if not for a late fumble, we were marching down the field to tie the game.
You kind of brought up a point there I've never thought about. How difficult is that? You go to a place like Johnsburg last week. How different is that for your kids? You get a town like Johnsburg to travel to Chicago. Those kids have probably visited the city before, those kind of things, but it's not like anybody in Chicago is really dying to visit a small town, on the west side of the state. How different is that of a trip for your kids when you have to make a trip like that?
Yeah, both Stillman Valley and Johnsburg, the hospitality that we received was unbelievable. The fans were really supportive. The athletic departments really took care of our young men. I know it seems silly, but to us it's a big deal. Stillman Valley, when we got back on the bus, every boy got a pork chop sandwich. When we're in Johnsburg, everybody got 2 Nathan's all-beef hot dogs. It's that kind of support. A lot of times our young men aren't used to that kind of thing, so for them, it really brings out pride in them to say, hey, there is a whole other world out here for us. And it really helps to expand their horizons, so to speak.
I talked to Beth Long, like in week 8 of the season. She's with Scout.com, the Sun-Times, Fox Sports. And I asked her, I said, Beth, who is the best high school football team in Chicago? And the first words out of her mouth were Phillips. Do you think you're the best high school football team in Chicago right now?
I don't know if I want to get into that debate. We're focused on Rockford Lutheran this week, and our goal is to really come out and put our best game forward, and hopefully at the end of the game, the scoreboard's in our favor.
We've kind of teased around it a couple of times, but how do you try to defend James Robinson today?
It's difficult when you see him on film. He's so fast and so dynamic. I swear, coach is putting Vaseline on him, and he's so slippery out there. But you just try to put. We try to line up and make him have to make a decision early. So when he gets the ball, he's got to make a cut. He's got to make his move early, and then let our defenders, Amani Jones, set his sights on him and make the play.
You're playing at Gately Stadium. Give us a little bit of background on Gately Stadium. Do you play all your home games there, and what's the atmosphere like, and which part of Chicago is that actually in?
So we actually play our home games at Mandrake Park, which is just down the street from the school, from our school. But because of state regulations, we're not able to play a state playoff game there. So we have to go to Gately, which is one of the Chicago public school stadiums. It's located on the south side of Chicago. Mount Carmel plays all their home games there. So it's a nice atmosphere. It's field turf. It's a big stadium. And when it gets loud, it's a big home field advantage. But if you don't have a big game, there's not much crowd. So it's actually sometimes a very quiet spot to have a game.
Gotcha. Well, when we look at today, what do you see being the key? Does this really come down to which team could stop the star player, either Collins or Robinson, the best, or is there another factor you look at to say, this could be the deciding outcome of the game?
Well, you mentioned it earlier with the weather. I think it's going to come down to, we always talk about turnovers. I know we're high-powered offenses, so to speak. Time of possession does play a role in the playoffs. And the last thing that it kind of gets overlooked is special teams. You just don't want to have the big mistakes, because this is the type of ball game that might just come down to who has the ball last. And you don't want to be the team that fumbled the snap on a punt or missed an extra point or threw an interception just at a bad time. And I think that's the key, is just turnovers, time of possession, and special teams.
Also real quick too, you had mentioned earlier, you were hoping this was a semifinal game, and I think everybody was hoping that. How tough is it, regardless of who wins, whether it's you guys or Lutheran, to know that one of you still have to play, probably the toughest game you're going to play all year, and then have to try to go win another game before you can make it to a state championship game?
Yeah, that's the difficult part. The one thing we realized with our little run last year to the quarterfinals is you got to play everybody at some point, whether it's in the semifinals, quarterfinals, or even the first round. And I think each game gets a little more harder. So even though everybody's saying this is the game to get, well, Whole City Mantino are no slouches,
right?
So it's the semifinals. I think that's the focus you can how to bring everybody back in, is to say, hold on, we haven't done anything yet. The goal is to get to the state championship game. That's the way to refocus everybody, to make sure you don't overlook anyone.
We've been talking to Phillips coach Troy McAllister. They'll take on Rockford Lutheran today. It should be a great game, great atmosphere. And thanks, Coach, again for taking time on a Saturday morning to be on our show, and we really appreciate it. And good luck to the Wildcats today.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We've been talking with Troy McAllister from Phillips. That was very insightful. I enjoyed
it was.
That.
It gives you a lot of great information, especially for fans from this area, to get ready for a game tonight. Because obviously you read a little bit here and there, so you know a little bit about Phillips, but it's nice to get it from the coach and really get in depth on the team.
I always say that you got to have a good coach. You can have great players, but if you have a good coach, that puts a lot of things in perspective. And I think he's got his kids right where he needs. So it's going to be an interesting game tonight.
It will be.
And it's on turf. That's interesting. That should help a little bit tonight.
Yeah, it should. It should at least keep for a good surface, if nothing else, and then from there, just see what happens.
If you want to know how it's going to feel, go out at 6 o'clock tonight and sit on your front porch and kind of see what they're going through. Hey, we're going to take a timeout, and we'll be back to wrap up the State Line Sports Hour right here on News Talk 1440 WROK.
Hey, this is Greg Saunders, your host for the Saturday